Dior isn't just a fashion house, it's a legend. But what really makes Dior Dior? Today we're breaking down this story, this style, and the people behind one of the most iconic brands in the world. I'm Anna, and let's dive in. For the beginning, let's look at the DNA of Dior, how it started and how it's reflected in today's collections. Just a very quick look back at the brand history. Christian Dior took a long and winding road before creating his label. By the time he founded it, he was already 42 years old. He had studied political science, worked in an art gallery, tried his hand at book illustration, and even served in the army. It was only in 1947 that the Dior fashion house opened its doors. Sadly, Christian worked there for just 10 years. In 1957, he died suddenly of a heart attack, an incredibly short career compared to other famous designers. In that limited time, he simply didn't have the chance to build the complex, multi-layered brand DNA. In fact, it came down to just two key elements. So, the first thing most people think of when they hear Dior is new look. The name given to the ultra-feminine silhouette that became the brand's signature. It was all about the sharply defined waist and full skirt that flared out. This shape gave women the coveted hourglass figure, and Christian Dior himself was all about celebrating femininity, a narrow waist and traditional beauty. Christian Dior opened his fashion house just 2 years after the end of the war, at the time when women were eager to return to dressing in something beautiful and luxurious. Dior's collections and that now iconic silhouette instantly got attention. The look became a huge success, and the new look's two main elements were the bar jacket and the full skirt. The bar jacket is a fitted jacket with a peplum, designed to make waist look slimmer and hips fuller. It's considered an iconic Dior shape appearing in almost every collection to this day, though other brands have borrowed it too. Dior often paired the jacket with a full skirt, which became another color-code of the house. Watch almost any Hollywood film from the 1950s, and you'll see women in that unmistakable Dior outfit, a full skirt and a defined waist. Alongside the full skirt, Dior also created a pencil skirt, cut just below the knee, which he paired with the bar jacket. That pencil skirt became a classic, and even 70 years later, it's still a wardrobe must-have. That's it. This is essentially what Dior managed to create in just 10 years in terms of clothing. But he also firmly embedded fragrance into the brand's DNA. In the same year, he launched his house, 1947, and released his first hugely successful new look collection. Dior also introduced his first perfume, Miss Dior. That scent, still popular today, was an immediate hit. From that moment on, Dior never stopped making fragrances, releasing a new signature scent almost every decade. And since Christian Dior led the house for 10 years, in this video we'll also look at the creative directors who followed the way and shaped Dior. After Dior's sudden death, the next designer in line was no one other than Yves Saint Laurent. But right from the start, his first collection, called Trapeze, shocked everyone. The name says it all. A trapeze silhouette is the complete opposite of Dior's new look. Instead of emphasizing the waist, the silhouette hid the female figure under a loose trapezoid-shaped dress. On one hand, it was a fresh breath of air, exactly what you'd expect from the new designer. But the change was so dramatic that the brand's owner got scared. They worried about losing the loyal customers who loved Dior classic aesthetic. Yves Saint Laurent's next collection impressed investors even less, and they decided to let him go. Around the same time, the Algerian War broke out and Saint Laurent was called up to serve in the army. He stayed there only 20 days before suffering a breakdown and was allowed to return home. So, of course, when he got back, he was surprised to learn that Dior wasn't extending his contract. So Yves Saint Laurent sued Dior and won a substantial settlement. Shortly after, he launched his own legendary fashion house, Saint Laurent. And this story proves that sometimes things happen to the best. If Dior hadn't fired him, back then, who knows if the brand would even exist today? And that's how Yves Saint Laurent's story began. So what's next? After Yves Saint Laurent, Dior hired a French designer named Marc Bohan. We have to talk about him because he was the creative director who worked with the Dior longest, almost 30 years. Alongside Christian Dior, Bohan helped shape the brand's DNA and the codes that we still talk about today. In his very first year, Marc created an alternative to the original new look and called it the slim look. This was a softer, more streamlined take on Dior's iconic silhouette. The jacket became narrower and shorter, paired with a straight skirt. Since he started in 60s, when the miniskirt was the symbol of freedom and the first wave of feminism, Bohan skillfully introduced the mini into the Dior's collection. Unlike Yves Saint Laurent's abrupt changes, Bohan made a gradual shift away from Christian Dior's classic, slowly adding his own touches. And thanks to that, Dior clients happily embraced the shorter skirt. One of Bohan's signature details that still show up in Dior today is a delicate bow, used as a decorative element on dresses. If you open a Dior online store, you will find this bow on almost every piece, especially ones referencing to the old Dior. And he also created a three-leaf bow, often seen on evening wear, and this motif remains part of Dior modern collections. Despite the fact that era of Marc Bohan bringing in iconic clients like Grace Kelly, Marlene Dietrich, Sophie Loren, Elizabeth Taylor, and more of that, his focus was mostly on designing clothes for real women. His designs were simpler compared to Christian Dior's extravagant style. As you probably know, Christian Dior was famous for his lavish use of expensive materials, and the brand owners started worrying that Bohan had simplified Dior aesthetic too much. And fast forward to the recent history, when Bernard Arnault, one of the richest men in the world today, took over the brand, he also didn't like this simplicity. So in 1989, Bohan was let go. Next, we have a very interesting turn. For the first time in Dior's history, an Italian became the creative director of the brand. Gianfranco Ferré. He brought back what was missing under Bohan: luxurious fabrics, elegant draping, and a touch of extravagance. Yet, the silhouette still respected the classic new look style. For example, the coat he designed became very popular. One of Ferré's most important contributions was creating the client handbag. When Bernadette Chirac, the wife of the French president, fell in love with the bag, she gifted it to Princess Diana. Diana adored it and was often seen with it in public. It's not a surprise to anyone that eventually Dior renamed the bag Lady Dior in her honor. If you ever been to a Dior boutique, if you ever followed any influencer on Instagram, you've definitely seen this iconic bag. Gianfranco Ferré and the Lady Dior handbag opened the door for Dior's reputation as a powerhouse, not just in clothing, but also in handbags. And that remains a major part of the brand's identity today. When we talk about Dior, that's probably the first thing people think about when they hear Dior. Of course, it's a new look, but the bags are the huge part of the DNA today. And fast forward to almost nowadays, I still don't believe that 2016 was already almost 10 years ago. But in 2016, for the first time in Dior's history, in 70 years Dior history, a woman became the creative director. Maria Grazia Chiuri took the role, and her first collection caused a lot of criticism. People said she didn't bring anything new to the fashion house, but critics' opinions don't tell the full story. Dior's real success under her says otherwise. Maria Grazia created a new generation of Dior girls, and her collections still excite audiences today. The news that Maria Grazia Chiuri would lead Dior was one of the biggest fashion events of 2016. It wasn't just because she was the first woman in the role, but also because she left Valentina after 25 years to take the position. Before Maria, Raf Simons was Dior creative director. He was beloved by critics, but admitted that working at Dior nearly exhausted him. Naturally, people were skeptical about how Maria Grazia could fill his shoes. Her main mission at Dior was to win over millennials and Gen Z. The first thing she did was speak their language, literally, using hashtags. This was the start of the merch era where people bought items more for slogans and messages than for design. Instagram helped fuel this trend, and Maria Grazia made iconic pieces with phrases like J'adore and We should all be feminists. These slogans appeared on t-shirts, shoes, bags, and became instant must-haves. And of course, Maria Grazia became a designer activist, bringing a fresh spirit to Dior. She consistently references feminism, working with women photographers, celebrating influential women, and designing pieces inspired by pioneers like Amelia Earhart and Georgia O'Keeffe. But her feminism is balanced and relatable. She is feminine, stylish, values family, and fights for women's rights and opportunities without rejecting traditional femininity. This approach resonated with young women who quickly wanted to associate themselves with Dior and its values. Maria Grazia's Dior girls embraced femininity while feeling modern and empowered. Unlike other brands experimenting with gender-neutral styles, she chose to celebrate being a woman, combining elegance, confidence, and self-expression. What we can see in her collection is modern take on Dior's classics. Narrow waist, full skirt, and highlighted legs became hugely popular on Instagram. Even though critics said she wasn't innovating, returning to this classic femininity is what sparkled Dior mania. And what's the least important for us as consumers and the most important for the brand itself is that commercially Maria Grazia understands the importance of must-have pieces. Because most luxury buyers focus on timeless items like bags, shoes, and outerwear. So creating standout items in these categories is key for revenue. She's proven that creative director can be both visionary and commercially successful, shaping your style and culture at the same time. So what hits? What exact pieces has Maria Grazia Chiuri created or revived? Let's start with bags. The interesting thing is that Christian Dior himself, unlike contemporaries like Coco Chanel or Yves Saint Laurent, never designed a single bag. All the iconic Dior bags were created after his death by later creative directors. One of those bags got a second life thanks to Maria Grazia Chiuri, turning it into a must-have for every girl. It basically blew up among influencers and you still see it on the streets all the time, the saddlebag. Fun fact, it was originally designed by John Galliano. And still we're mentioning John Galliano, yes, he was a design director at Dior for I think almost 15 years. But during these 15 years he created a few iconic pieces like the saddlebag that's still part of the Dior's DNA today. Unfortunately, he was fired after these 15 years because of some scandal. And at one point the brand kind of retired this bag, the saddlebag, but Chiuri gave it a new life. Back in Galliano's time, it even appeared in season 3 of Sex and the City. Chiuri was banking on the idea that girls who saw it as kids might remember it, and now, as adults, they finally got the chance to own a fresh and modern version. Another iconic Dior bag that she created from scratch is the Dior Book Tote. Launched in 2018, it's a huge bag and fashion girls quickly started using it as a beach bag or a shopper bag. And, of course, shoes. When it comes to shoes, the Dior pumps became the big hit. Pumps have always been part of Dior's DNA, and after years of sneakers dominating the scene, girls wanted elegant shoes back again. We can say that other brands like Prada partially filled that gap, but Chiuri gave the classic Dior pump a modern twist, making it slightly sportier with that signature shadow strap, and it's still popular today. Another thing that we should thank Maria Grazia Chiuri for is print. She also revived Dior Classic Oblique print, originally created in 1967. This was smart because logo mania had come back thanks to brands like Balenciaga, and she brought the print back across bags, shoes, clothes, hats, scarves, basically everywhere. Since logomania is still huge, items with this print sell really well. Lesson learned. Maria Grazia Chiuri proved is that you don't always need to start a fashion revolution or invent something completely new like Gucci did. You can take a smart classical approach and make the brand one of the most desired in recent years, while winning the hearts of young women in the process. And of course, I can't avoid mentioning The biggest fashion news from this year is Jonathan Anderson joining Dior. He was born in Northern Ireland in 1984, and he's a designer behind J.W. Anderson and the creative director who turned Loewe into one of the most interesting brands in fashion. At Loewe, he created the puzzle bag, which became a modern icon, and worked on unexpected projects, including his Every Year line for Uniqlo. In 2025, he became the first person, since Christian Dior himself, to run the men's, women's, and haute couture collections at Dior. His first Dior men's show blended Irish tweed with French elegance, white trousers with relaxed tailoring, and even reimagined the women's book Tote for menswear, covering it with prints from Dracula and Dangerous License. For the women's line, he already teased new bags that combine Irish craft details with Parisian refinement, direction that signals that Dior heritage will stay intact while evolving in unexpected ways. And honestly, I can't wait to see the actual women collection created by him. So what can we conclude? Dior is a brand that feels classical and timeless, yet it's never typical. Unsurprisingly, much of what defines the DNA today, its iconic bags, shoes and prints, was created long after Christian Dior himself passed away. The brand's magic lies in how each creative director has taken its heritage and updated it for today, turning classic ideas into contemporary icons. Dior proves that a fashion house doesn't need to constantly reinvent itself from scratch. It can honor its roots while staying unexpected, desirable, and relevant across generations.